Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship watching the stars through the main screen. The UES Relentless moved slowly through space compared to the other ships in the fleet. Around them, alien vessels zipped past like silver bullets cutting through the darkness. The Zephyrian ships looked like sharp needles that could twist and turn faster than human eyes could follow. Their hulls gleamed with strange metals that bent light around them, making them hard to see even when they were right there. The Etherian destroyers were even stranger. They looked like they were made of living crystal that sparkled with inner light. Sometimes they would fade, until you could see right through them like ghosts. Then they would become solid again in the blink of an eye. Morrison had watched them phase in and out of normal space during training exercises, and it still made his head hurt to think about how they did it. The Corvin ships were the biggest and most frightening. They were massive metal fortresses covered in weapons and armor, thick enough to stop a small moon. But even these giant dreadnoughts could accelerate so fast they would turn any human crew into soup. Their alien crews were machines themselves, so they did not care about the crushing forces that would kill any living thing. Morrison looked at his own ship in the reflection of the bridge windows. The Relentless was nothing like these graceful alien vessels. It was a big gray box with thick walls and simple lines. Where the alien ships had smooth curves, the human ship had flat surfaces and sharp corners. Where they had exotic energy fields glowing around their hulls, the Relentless had plain metal painted dull, gray. Lieutenant Amy Watson sat at her communication station reading messages from the alien fleet commanders. She looked up at Morrison with a tired expression. The messages were always the same. Suggestions that the human ship should stay in the back where it would be safe. Recommendations that they guard the supply ships instead of fighting with the real warships. Today was worse than usual. Captain, the Zephyrian Admiral wants us to consider mining asteroid duty, Watson said, trying to keep her voice steady. He says our ship is built strong enough to ram space rocks without breaking apart. The bridge crew exchanged looks. It was not the first time their alien allies had found creative ways to insult the human contribution to the war. For 3 months since humanity joined the Galactic Alliance, the Relentless had been treated like the unwanted cousin at a family gathering. Commander Lisa Park pulled up tactical displays at her station. The numbers made Morrison feel sick every time he saw them. Sir, the Zephyrian ships just hit a new speed record. They reached 97% of light speed in normal space without using hyperspace drives. Morrison nodded. Even their fastest experimental ships back on Earth could barely reach 30% of light speed. The aliens made it look easy. What about the Corvin acceleration rates? Their plasma drives are generating 15,000 times Earth gravity, Captain. They can change direction so fast the forces involved would turn human bones to powder in seconds. That was the problem, Morrison thought. Humans were weak. Their bodies could only handle so much acceleration before organs started failing and bones started breaking. Even with the best artificial gravity systems, human ships were limited by what human crews could survive. The aliens had no such problems. Some had mechanical bodies that could handle any force. Others had exotic biology that let them exist in multiple dimensions at once. A few were energy beings who did not even need physical bodies. Humanity had arrived late to the galactic community. While other species had been building faster than light ships for thousands of years, humans had only developed interstellar travel 50 years ago. They brought fusion drives and kinetic weapons to a battlefield dominated by antimatter engines and reality warping guns. It was like showing up to a modern war with muskets and cannons. Priority transmission from Fleet Command, announced Ensign Carl Brown from the navigation station. His voice carried the tone of someone who knew the message would not be good news. The main screen flickered and showed Grand Admiral Thexnol of the Etherian fleet. The alien looked like a living statue made of clear crystal filled with dancing lights. Behind him, Morrison could see the command centers of a dozen other alien fleet leaders. Their forms were so different from humans it was sometimes hard to remember they were all supposed to be on the same side. Human vessel Relentless. The Grand Admiral spoke with a voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. You are assigned to patrol Sector 7 Alpha. Our intelligence reports minimal void collective activity in that region. You should find it suitable for your capabilities. Morrison felt anger build in his chest. Sector 7 Alpha was empty space between star systems. It was the galactic equivalent of being told to guard an empty field while the real soldiers fought the war. Grand Admiral, with respect, the Relentless is a fully armed warship. We should be fighting alongside the main fleet. Sounds that might have been laughter came from several alien commanders. Admiral Vextar of the Zephyrian Navy coiled his snake-like body, and what Morrison had learned was their version of amusement. "Captain Morrison, your vessel maximum velocity is 0.3 light speed. Our slowest scout ships move twice that fast. In real combat, you would be destroyed before you could fire a single shot." Morrison tried again. "Our weapon systems are fully functional and our crew is trained for battle." "Your weapons," interrupted General Korth of the Corvin Imperium in a voice like grinding metal. "Fire solid, projectiles and crude fusion bombs. The Void Collective adaptive shielding systems treat such primitive technology as a minor annoyance at best." The transmission ended suddenly, leaving the bridge of the Relentless in uncomfortable silence. Morrison stared at the blank screen, feeling the weight of 3 months of constant dismissal and barely hidden contempt from their supposed allies. He turned to face his crew and saw the same frustration and anger in their faces that he felt in his own heart. "Well, you heard them," Morrison said, trying to keep his voice calm. "Set course for Sector 7 Alpha. Looks like we get to play security guard while the real warriors handle the actual war." As the Relentless slowly turned toward its assigned patrol, route its massive fusion engines glowing with steady blue fire, none of them could imagine that within 3 days, every military leader in the galaxy would know the name of their ship. The slow primitive human warship that everyone mocked was about to become the most feared vessel in known space. But first they had to survive long enough to prove that sometimes being underestimated was the greatest advantage of all. 3 days passed slowly in Sector 7 Alpha, and the crew of the Relentless had fallen into the boring routine of deep space patrol. They ran system checks and weapon drills to keep busy, while their sensors swept the empty darkness between stars looking for any sign of enemy activity. The Void Collective had been quiet in this region for months, according to intelligence reports. It was exactly the kind of safe, meaningless assignment that kept the human ship out of real combat. Lieutenant Watson was monitoring long-range communications when her console suddenly lit up with emergency signals. Her face went pale as she read the incoming data streams. "Captain, I am picking up massive energy readings from the Kepler system. The main fleet is under attack." Morrison rushed onto the bridge, still holding his coffee cup. Steam rose from the hot liquid, but he barely noticed as Watson continued her report. "Sir, the entire Galactic Defense Fleet is in combat. I am reading over 200 hostile contacts, and the numbers keep growing." The main screen came alive with tactical feeds from the battle zone. What Morrison saw made his blood freeze in his veins. The elegant alien ships that had dismissed his vessel just days before were being torn apart by enemies. Unlike anything in their databases, the Void Collective had brought a fleet that defied every rule of space combat the galaxy knew. The enemy ships looked wrong in ways that hurt to think about. They were not built but grown like living things. Their hulls curved and twisted in patterns that made no sense to human eyes. Dark energy flowed across their surfaces like black blood, and wherever they moved, space itself seemed to bend around them. They absorbed light, creating pockets of absolute darkness that moved through the battle like holes cut in reality. "The Zephyrians are trying to use their speed advantage," reported Commander Park as she watched the tactical display. Her voice was tight with worry as she saw Admiral Vextar flagship twist through space at incredible velocity. The snake-like alien was pushing his ship to maximum acceleration, trying to outrun the dark vessels that pursued him. For a moment, it looked like the Zephyrian speed would save them. Their ship was moving so fast it appeared as just a streak of light on the sensors. But then something impossible happened. The space around the fleeing vessel suddenly changed. Darkness reached out like invisible hands and grabbed the Zephyrian ship. The elegant vessel crumpled like paper in a giant fist before exploding in a brief flash of light. Morrison watched in horror as ship after ship fell to the Void Collective forces. The Etherian vessels tried to phase shift into other dimensions to escape the attacks, but somehow the enemy weapons struck across multiple layers of reality at once. The beautiful crystal ships shattered like glass ornaments dropped on stone floors. Their inner light died as they broke apart, leaving only glittering fragments drifting through space. The massive Corvin dreadnoughts with their incredible acceleration found themselves trapped in fields of twisted space-time. Their own speed became a weapon against them as they were caught in gravity wells that should not have existed. Morrison watched General Korth command ship struggle against forces that held it motionless, while dark energy beams tore through its heavy armor like it was made of tissue, paper. "Sir, we are receiving a priority transmission From what remains of Fleet Command, Ensign Brown called out. His young voice cracked with emotion as he struggled to maintain his composure. The transmission quality was poor and filled with static from battle damage. The screen flickered, showing the damaged interior of a dying Corvan ship. General Korth's mechanical form was sparking from multiple hits, and his optical sensors flickered on and off as power systems failed throughout his vessel. Behind him, Morrison could see the chaos of a warship in its final moments as explosions rocked the hull. All units retreat immediately. The artificial voice of the Corvan general was distorted by damage to his vocal systems. Enemy forces have adaptive technology that learns from every engagement. All conventional tactics are useless against them. They counter every weapon we fire. They predict every maneuver we make. The transmission dissolved into static as another explosion tore through the Corvan vessel. Morrison realized he was watching the death of the most advanced military force in galactic history. Over 300 warships representing the best technology of a dozen different civilizations were being systematically destroyed by an enemy that seemed to learn and adapt faster than anyone could fight back. "Captain, what are your orders?" Commander Park asked quietly. Her hands hovered over the navigation controls, waiting for instructions. Every instinct told them to run as fast as their slow human ship could manage. The Relentless was one vessel against a force that had just annihilated the combined might of the greatest spacefaring races in known. Space Morrison gripped his command chair as he watched the final few Allied ships die on his screen. These were the same alien crews who had mocked his primitive vessel just days before. Now they were burning in the vacuum of space while their killer ships moved through the wreckage like predators, savoring their victory. The sight filled him with cold anger that settled in his chest like a block of ice. "Helm set course for the Kepler system," Morrison ordered. "Maximum burn on all engines." Sir Brown's voice was barely a whisper of disbelief. The young ensign stared at his captain as if Morrison had just ordered them to fly directly into a star. "Did you say the Kepler system?" "You heard me correctly, Ensign. We are going to war." Commander Park leaned close to Morrison and spoke in an urgent whisper. "Jake, this is suicide. We cannot fight those things. They just destroyed the most powerful fleet in galactic history in less than 4 hours. What can one human ship do against enemies that advanced?" Morrison continued watching the tactical display as the last transmission from the battlefield cut to nothing but static. The entire galactic defense fleet was gone. In less than 4 hours, the greatest naval force in galactic history had been reduced to floating debris and expanding clouds of radioactive gas. 300 ships and millions of crew members from dozens of worlds had died while he watched helplessly from the safety of empty space. "Maybe you are right," Morrison said quietly as he stared at the screen showing nothing but the aftermath of slaughter. "But those things have never fought humans before. They adapted to counter every advanced weapon and exotic technology the galaxy could throw at them. But they have never seen our crude kinetic weapons and primitive nuclear bombs." He turned to face his crew with determination burning in his eyes. "They learned how to fight the most sophisticated military technology in known space, but they have no idea what to do with rocks and firecrackers fired by people too stupid to know when they are beaten." The UES Relentless dropped out of hyperspace 12 hours later, at the edge of the Kepler system, where the greatest battle in galactic history had ended in complete disaster. Where once over 300 Allied warships had fought bravely, there was now only debris floating in the cold vacuum of space. Twisted metal fragments that had once been proud vessels drifted slowly through expanding clouds of plasma and radioactive gas that marked the graves of entire civilizations. "Passive sensors only," Morrison ordered as they moved carefully through the wreckage field. "I want to know everything about these enemies before they discover we are here." Lieutenant Watson worked frantically at her station, analyzing the residual energy signatures left behind by the battle. Her instruments detected traces of exotic particles and strange radiation patterns unlike anything in human databases. "So the enemy ships are still in the system. I count 15 contacts moving in organized search patterns through the debris field." Morrison studied the main screen as it displayed the locations of the Void Collective vessels. Up close, they were even more disturbing than the long-range tactical feeds had shown. Their hulls curved and flowed like living tissue covered in what looked like veins carrying dark energy instead of blood. They moved through space with predatory grace that suggested intelligence, rather than simple mechanical programming. "They are scanning the wreckage," Captain reported. Chief Petty Officer Frank Cooper from the sensor station. "It looks like they are studying the debris. learning from what remains of our allies' ships. Morrison nodded grimly, understanding the implications. These creatures had demonstrated the ability to adapt their tactics in real time during combat. Of course, they would analyze the aftermath to better understand the technology and weapons of their enemies. Every piece of wreckage was a lesson that would make them more dangerous in future battles. "Sir, one of the enemy vessels is heading directly toward our position," Commander Park whispered urgently. Her hands moved to the weapons controls, preparing for immediate combat. A Void Collective ship easily 3 times larger than the Relentless began moving slowly in their direction. Its hull rippled with waves of dark energy that seemed to probe outward like invisible tentacles feeling for hidden threats. Morrison felt an uncomfortable sensation at the edges of his mind, as if something alien was trying to touch his thoughts. "Maintain complete radio silence," Morrison ordered quietly. "Let it come closer." The enemy ship approached with obvious caution, moving much slower than its obvious capabilities would allow. Morrison watched its sensor arrays sweep over their position with thorough precision. For several heart-stopping moments he was certain they had been discovered, and prepared himself for the brief violent end of his ship and crew. Then the alien vessel moved on, apparently dismissing the human ship as nothing more than another piece of battlefield debris. It continued its methodical search pattern, looking for more interesting salvage to examine and learn from. "They do not recognize us as a threat," Morrison realized with growing excitement. "Our technology is so primitive compared to the rest of the fleet that we do not register as a functional warship in their analysis. It was the first real advantage they had gained since joining this war, and Morrison intended to use it wisely." He turned to Watson, who was still analyzing the battle data streaming through her instruments. "Lieutenant, what did you learn from studying the engagement?" Watson's face was pale, but her voice remained steady as she delivered her report. "Sir, the enemy adapted to energy weapons almost instantly. The Zephyrian plasma cannons were completely ineffective after the first few successful hits. Same result with the Etherian quantum disruptors and the Corvin antimatter beams. Whatever hit them once never worked again." "What about their defensive systems?" Morrison asked. "Adaptive shielding that learns from incoming attacks and modifies itself to counter similar weapons," Watson replied. "But Captain, there is something strange in the data. They adapted to counter every type of weapon used against them except for one category." Morrison leaned forward with interest. "What kind of weapons did they not adapt to, Lieutenant?" "Kinetic impacts, sir. The analysis shows that the only real damage the Allied fleet managed to inflict came from a few Corvin ships that rammed enemy vessels before being destroyed. Simple mass moving at high velocity seems to be something their adaptive systems cannot counter effectively." A cold smile spread across Morrison's face as he began to understand their situation. Kinetic weapons were exactly what the human ship carried. Chunks of dense metal accelerated to incredible speeds by magnetic rails. No exotic energy signatures for the enemy to analyze and counter. No complex particle interactions to adapt defensive systems against. Just basic physics involving mass and velocity that had worked the same way since the universe began. "Park, what is our current weapon status?" Morrison asked his second in command. Commander Park quickly brought up tactical displays showing their full arsenal. "All systems are green, Captain. We have 48 kinetic kill vehicles, each weighing 10 tons and capable of reaching 15% of light speed, plus our main railguns loaded with depleted uranium slugs for close-range combat. And our nuclear warhead magazine. 60 fusion warheads, sir, with yields ranging from 50 kilotons up to 2 megatons. But, Captain, nuclear weapons are considered obsolete technology by galactic standards. No one has used them in space combat for over 1,000 years." "Exactly," Morrison said with satisfaction. "Primitive, crude weapons that every advanced civilization abandoned long ago." He moved to the tactical display and began studying the enemy formation as they continued their search through the debris field. "Listen carefully, everyone. We are about to attempt something that every other species in this galaxy would consider completely impossible. We are going to hunt these creatures." Ensign Brown looked up from his navigation console with obvious concern. "Sir, they outnumber us 15 to 1, and each of their ships is much larger than ours. How can we possibly fight them?" "Because they spent the last several hours learning how to counter antimatter beams and quantum torpedoes and phase-shifted particle weapons," Morrison explained patiently. "They have no experience at all with chunks of metal moving at 15% of light speed or primitive fusion bombs that explode with simple nuclear fire." He studied the movement patterns of the enemy ships as they methodically searched the wreckage. The Void Collective adapted perfectly to fight the galaxy's most advanced weapon systems, but they have never encountered our rocks and firecrackers. Commander Park was already working on targeting solutions and attack vectors. Sir, if we are going to try this, we need to be very smart about our tactics. Hit-and-run attacks using our small size and their overconfidence against them. Agreed completely. Watson, can you mask our engine signature to make us look like drifting debris? Watson was already modifying their power output and adjusting their reactor emissions. Working on it now, Captain. I can make our energy signature match the background radiation from the battle. They will not detect us until we are ready to strike. Morrison looked around at his crew of 37 humans, who had volunteered to serve on what the entire galaxy considered the most obsolete warship in the fleet. They were frightened, and he could see it clearly in their faces. But they were also angry about the genocide they had just witnessed. The Void Collective had destroyed entire civilizations in a few hours, and showed no sign of stopping their expansion. Helm, bring us about slowly, Morrison ordered. We are going hunting. The first kill came 18 hours after the Relentless entered the debris field, and began stalking the enemy vessels like a submarine hunting in dark waters. Morrison had chosen his target carefully after watching the alien ships for most of a day. A lone Void Collective vessel had separated from the main group to examine the wreckage of Admiral Vextar flagship in detail. The enemy ship extended long tendril-like appendages from its hull to sample pieces of the destroyed Zephyrian vessel. Its dark surface pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that suggested active learning processes as it absorbed and analyzed the alien technology. Morrison watched through the main viewer as the creature ship fed on the knowledge contained in the debris. Range 40,000 kilometers, whispered Chief Cooper from the sensor station. Target is completely motionless and focused entirely on the wreckage analysis. Weapons status, Morrison asked quietly. Commander Park hands moved carefully over her console as she prepared their attack. Kinetic kill vehicle loaded and ready for launch, Captain. Target lock is solid and firing solution confirmed. Morrison studied the alien ship through the magnified view on his screen. It was beautiful in a terrifying way, with organic curves that flowed like liquid metal under starlight. Strange sensor organs that looked more biological than mechanical dotted its hull. The whole vessel gave off an unsettling sense of intelligence that made his skin crawl with unease. Fire, Morrison ordered. Deep within the Relentless hull, the main railgun system hummed with massive electrical power as magnetic coils accelerated a 10-ton tungsten rod to 15% of light speed in less than 2 seconds. There was no bright flash of energy or exotic particle beam that might alert the target to incoming danger. Just a simple chunk of extremely dense metal moving fast enough to punch clean through a small asteroid. The Void Collective ship never detected the attack coming toward it through space. The kinetic kill vehicle struck the alien vessel exactly amidships with the kinetic energy of a small nuclear weapon. The enemy adaptive shields that had easily deflected quantum torpedoes and antimatter beams offered absolutely no resistance to simple mass and velocity. The tungsten rod punched completely through the organic hull, creating a perfectly round hole that immediately began venting atmosphere and strange fluids into the vacuum of space. Morrison watched with grim satisfaction as the alien ship biological patterns flickered frantically while it tried to understand and adapt to this new type of attack. The enemy vessel hull began sealing around the wound, showing impressive regenerative abilities as living metal flowed like water to close the breach. But the damage was already done, as secondary explosions rippled through the interior when critical systems failed from the massive kinetic impact. Target is heavily damaged and venting multiple hull breaches, reported Cooper with barely controlled excitement in his voice. But sir, the ship is still functional and attempting repairs. Then we finish what we started, Morrison said coldly. Load nuclear warhead with proximity fuse settings. The torpedo that launched from the Relentless was a crude weapon by modern galactic standards. It was nothing more than a basic fusion bomb with simple guidance systems and no exotic defensive countermeasures. The kind of primitive device that had been obsolete in most spacefaring civilizations for hundreds of years. The wounded Void Collective ship sensors detected the incoming missile, but its adaptive systems were completely confused by what they found. The torpedo energy signature was so simple and primitive, compared to the sophisticated weapons it had been designed to counter, that its defensive programming simply did not know how to respond effectively. The 2-megaton nuclear warhead detonated 50 meters from the alien vessel hull in a brief flash of nuclear fire. In the vacuum of space, atomic weapons do not create the familiar mushroom clouds seen on planetary surfaces. Instead, the explosion was a brilliant white star that lasted only seconds, but released enough energy to tear apart molecular bonds. When the radiation cleared, the Void Collective ship was completely gone. It had been torn into tiny fragments by forces so direct and crude that its sophisticated defenses might as well have been made of paper. Nuclear fire had reduced an advanced alien warship to scattered atoms drifting through space. "First kill confirmed," Morrison said quietly with grim satisfaction. "Helm, get us out of here immediately. The other enemy ships will have detected that explosion." As the Relentless moved away from the attack site using minimal power to avoid detection, Morrison felt a cold sense of accomplishment. 1 enemy vessel destroyed and 14 remaining in the system, but he knew the easy targets were finished now. The Void Collective had learned there was still an active threat in the debris field. Over the next 6 hours, a deadly game of cat and mouse began in earnest among the floating wreckage of the greatest fleet in galactic history. The alien ships spread out in systematic search patterns using their exotic sensors to sweep every cubic meter of space for their hidden attacker. The Relentless hid among the debris like a predator waiting in tall grass. The second kill required more patience and careful planning. Morrison spent 2 hours watching a pair of Void Collective ships moving in perfect formation through the wreckage field. Watson analyzed their movement patterns while the rest of the crew waited in tense silence. "They are moving in complete synchronization, Captain," Watson finally reported. "Their navigation systems are networked together so they can anticipate each other's movements and avoid accidental collisions." Morrison immediately saw the tactical opportunity their coordination created. "If we can force one ship to make a sudden course change, the other will not be able to react in time." The plan was extremely risky and required precise timing that left no room for errors. The Relentless positioned itself along the projected flight path of the lead enemy vessel, then fired a spread of kinetic rounds not at the target but ahead of its projected course. The alien ship detected the incoming projectiles with its sophisticated sensors and immediately made an evasive maneuver exactly as Morrison had calculated. But the second ship, following in perfect formation, had no time to react to its partner's sudden course change. The 2 Void Collective vessels collided at significant velocity with their organic hulls rupturing as they tumbled through space, locked together. "Nuclear torpedoes target both ships," Morrison ordered without hesitation. The twin nuclear detonations lit up the debris field like miniature suns briefly outshining the distant star. When the atomic fire faded, 2 more enemy ships had been reduced to expanding clouds of superheated plasma and radioactive particles. 3 Void Collective vessels destroyed, and 12 still hunting through the wreckage for their tormentor. But Morrison could see the remaining aliens were learning from each encounter. Their search patterns became more unpredictable, and their hulls rippled with new defensive adaptations. The easy kills were definitely over, and the real fight was about to begin. By the time Morrison had destroyed 2 more enemy ships using clever tactics and hit-and-run attacks, the remaining Void Collective vessels had finally located the source of their problems. The game of hide-and-seek was over, as 10 alien ships surrounded the Relentless in a perfect sphere formation that cut off every possible escape route through space. "Sir, they are sending us a communication signal," Lieutenant Watson reported with tension clear in her voice as she monitored the alien transmission frequencies. "Put it on the main screen," Morrison ordered. The display flickered to life, showing something that made every human on the bridge feel sick to their stomachs. It was not the organic ship interior they had expected to see, but rather a chamber filled with floating translucent forms that might once have been living beings from different species. The voice that emerged was a harmony of multiple tones, as if dozens of different creatures were speaking together as one entity. "Human vessel, we are the Void Collective," the combined voices said in perfect unison. "You have destroyed 5 of our analysis ships. This was completely unexpected given your primitive technology level." Morrison straightened in his command chair and tried to project confidence he did not feel. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth ship Relentless. You just committed genocide against 12 different civilizations. Surrender immediately, and we might consider letting some of you survive this encounter." The harmonic laughter that answered his demand was like the sound of breaking glass mixed with screaming wind. "Surrender, Captain Morrison. We have analyzed your species from the biological remains found in the debris field. Humans are a primitive race that barely achieved interstellar travel. Your weapons are crude kinetic devices and chemical explosives. Your ship is slow and your technology is centuries behind your former allies. And yet we killed 5 of your ships," Morrison pointed out with cold satisfaction. "An interesting diversion," the alien voices admitted. "Your victories came through surprise attacks and our curiosity about your primitive tactical methods. But now we understand human warfare completely. Kinetic weapons, nuclear devices, and simple physics. We have adapted our defenses accordingly." As if to demonstrate their point, the 10 surrounding ships began to shimmer as their hulls took on a completely different texture and composition. "Our armor has been restructured at the molecular level to absorb and deflect kinetic impacts of any velocity. Your nuclear weapons will find our new energy shielding quite effective against primitive fusion reactions." Commander Park leaned close to Morrison's ear and whispered urgently, "Sir, they are right about the adaptations. Our sensors show their hull composition has changed dramatically from what we observed before. The same attacks that worked earlier will not be effective against these new defenses." Morrison nodded grimly, but he was not ready to surrender without a fight. "All weapons target the nearest enemy ship and prepare to fire everything we have," he ordered his crew. "If we are going down, we go down shooting." "Wait." The harmonic voice from the alien collective had changed, becoming more curious than immediately threatening. "Captain Morrison, before we destroy your vessel and crew, we wish to understand something that puzzles our analysis. Your species joined this galactic war only recently. Your technology is centuries behind that of your allies. Why do you continue to fight instead of retreating to preserve your lives?" Morrison looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew members. Lieutenant Watson, who was barely out of the Space Academy, but had never wavered at her communication station. Chief Cooper, who had 20 years of service on mining ships before joining the military when the war started. Ensign Brown, who was young enough to be Morrison's son but had already proven his courage under fire. Commander Park, who had turned down 3 different promotions to better ships because she believed in her crew and their mission. "You want to know why we fight?" Morrison asked as he stood up from his command chair. "It is because somebody has to make a stand. You wiped out the Zephyrians who could build ships faster than thought itself. You destroyed the Etherians who existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. You eliminated the Corvins who were machine, intelligences that had conquered the laws of physics themselves." He gestured toward the debris field visible on the main screen, where the remains of hundreds of ships drifted through space. "Every one of those civilizations was more advanced than humanity will be in 1,000 years of development. And you destroyed them all in less than 4 hours of combat." The alien voices murmured among themselves in harmonics too complex for human ears to follow before responding. "This explains nothing to our understanding. Those species fought because they were powerful and confident in their advanced capabilities. You fight despite being weak and primitive by comparison." "No," Morrison said quietly but with absolute conviction. "We fight because we are weak. When you are weak, you have to be willing to die for what is right, because it is the only way you can make any difference in the universe. The strong can afford to be cautious and calculate odds and make strategic retreats to fight another day. But the weak have to be willing to sacrifice everything because it is our only weapon." He moved to the tactical display showing the positions of the enemy ships surrounding them. "You have adapted to counter our weapons. You have learned from our tactics and prepared defenses against everything we can throw at you. But there is one thing about humans you will never understand, no matter how much you study us." "And what is that, Captain Morrison?" Morrison smiled with grim determination as he prepared to give his final order. "We are really, really good at spite, and we never know when to quit." He turned to address his entire crew over the ship communication system. "All hands, this is the captain. In 30 seconds I am going to ram this ship into the largest enemy vessel at maximum acceleration. It has been the greatest honor of my life to serve with every one of you." The bridge erupted in protests from his crew, but Morrison had already locked out their control systems. "Sir, you cannot do this." Commander Park grabbed his arm desperately. "There has to be another way to fight them." "There is no other way, Lisa," Morrison said gently. "But maybe when word of this gets back to Earth, they will build better ships. Maybe they will remember that sometimes the slow, primitive, obsolete warship was the only one left standing when everything else failed." "Sir, the enemy ships are moving to intercept our ramming course," Ensign Brown called out as his voice cracked with emotion. "They are already reinforcing their hulls against kinetic impact." Morrison watched the Void Collective vessels repositioning themselves as their adaptive technology prepared for humanity's final desperate attack. "Then we make sure they remember this moment. Watson, send a message back to Earth. Tell them what happened here." As the Relentless began its final acceleration toward the enemy formation, Morrison recorded humanity's last words in the battle for galactic freedom. The message would take years to reach home, but it would carry the story of the crew that refused to surrender when all hope was lost. The UES Relentless died as it had lived stubbornly and loudly with absolutely no regard for impossible odds. But in the nuclear fire of that final collision, something unexpected happened that changed everything.